Welcome to our second keynote, and that's probably the keynote you have been all waiting for the most. The impact of COVID-19 for the digital signage world, for retail and digital touchpoints in general. We try in the next 13 to 15 minutes to give you as much information as possible. Obviously, there's a lot to talk about, but we just want to kick it off, Stefan, huh? Should we? Yes, let's start. Good. That's my favorite thing. I found that when I was in Venice a few weeks ago, finally freedom. And you all in Italy, in Spain, and many other countries, you know how it felt to be confined to their own apartment. So this is really one of the signs we really like. Even it's not digital, but it was big on a shop window, and it really shows where the world currently is, and that we're all happy to have normal life again. So one thing which we believe is really important, because digital signage has never been more useful than today. But unfortunately, that does not necessarily lead to new business for the digital signage integrators. But the need for dynamic information, changing regulations, changing habits, all of these things, digital signage is perfectly made for that. And the question is, how well are retailers, how well are corporations able to use existing signage? Obviously, most of them don't have money to invest in new stuff, but how can they use existing signage to really inform their customers, their employees? So what does it mean for the world? Where are we? Well, this is if you look at the world map, it's IMF data. 2019, the world was growing, almost everything was green. 2020, it looks very bleak. Everything is red. Most of the world is red. Fortunately enough, in 2021, we are back to a growth scenario. So depending on where you are in the world, somewhere roughly between 8 to minus 10% is what IMF expects for this year. Advanced economies are a little bit worse. New developing countries are a little bit better, but in general, it will be a pretty bad year. What's quite interesting, IMF just updated some of the data, and the data is even worse now, the expectations, the outlook for this year and next year, than it was for a few weeks ago. What does it mean? Well, it means the markets will decline a lot this year. They will grow again next year, but unfortunately, we won't come back to January 2020 terms. So in this chart shows it quite nicely. The yellow part is really the difference, what's left over at the end of 2021. And you see, some countries are quite good, like Poland, for example. This is EU data. They're almost back to January to 2019 levels. Other countries like Italy, Spain, and France, for them it's still a long way to go. So yes, sharp decline this year, yes, sharp growth next year, but unfortunately, we won't be on the level we've been in 2019. Stefan.
Yeah, switching gears from a macroeconomic view to a more microeconomic view. So what does it really mean for businesses? And we try to point out here that the crisis usually takes different phases. So after the first shock that most of you, or almost everybody, has been through, there's this restart coming up. And depending on the geography, depending on the industry you're serving, many companies are right now in this restart moment. But what's really the critical bit is after restart, the learn and adjust phase. Because that's the moment of truth. That's where money gets tight, and that's where many companies struggle with pure survival. So in this phase, it's really about either you are in a situation where you have enough cash and you know that you will survive, you can invest, or it's pure survival mode. If you survived, it's going into adaptation mode, so really getting adapted to the new normal, set for new growth, and then finally go into the growth phase. And that's a typical way businesses go through this crisis. And how long these phases are and where you're at really depends on your geography you're serving and on the industries you're serving. And if we look into industries, and into recovery shapes, there are two basic shapes we're seeing. That's either Veja or Nike. So really a V-shaped recovery, going down quickly, recovering quickly, or it's more swoosh-shaped like Nike, where you go down quickly and then recover more slowly. And the macroeconomic data usually points more towards a swoosh-shape recovery. But there are many letters in the alphabet, so there are many forms of recovery. It can be V-shaped. It can also be A-shaped, so going up first, like for food industry, for example, home, beauty industry. It can be U-shaped, like for fashion, lifestyle, restaurants, automotive. L-shaped, especially for airlines, travel industry, where we don't see any forms of recovery very soon. T-shaped, like for healthcare industry and education, or S-shaped. So there are really different forms of recovery, and you have to get adapted to the different ways your clients are going to recover. You have to respond to that with different forms of recovery. But from recovery, the question is, how do consumers behave?
Well, that's very, very interesting because consumer behavior is changing a lot. And this is some interesting research because 62% of consumers currently refrain from being in proximity of retail staff, which is the disaster for physical retail, because that's what really makes a difference between online and physical, is having competent staff on the sales floor. So 6 out of 10 people are afraid of talking to people, which is not good. Half of them refrain from unnecessary touching products, and 45% of the consumers will refrain from testing, trying products, which is quite obvious. But on the other hand, this research also asks, what do you want? What do you expect? How should physical retail change? And 84% of the consumers, of the 1,000 consumers who were asked, want more apps, want more QR codes, where they can get information, product information, as well at the end of the day pay. But what's most interesting, 78% of them really said they want more signage. Isn't that fantastic news? That more and more people really want screens, which give additional information, brand history, all the stuff, stuff has done in the past. And 65% want guided selling displays. So that's exactly, helping them really analyzing, their needs and then finding the right products. So quite good data, and we think, it's quite interesting. And please take this, go to your customers, and really show them, there's a huge demand for signage. Communication. Communication has changed a lot in the past 6 months. We see 3 different levels of communication. There's a mandatory communication, more compliance stuff, especially in the beginning, with all the regulations. Then there was this feel-good communication, putting people back in a buying mood. Still working hard on this one. And the last one is like an emotional one, welcome back, great to see you again, all of this stuff. So it's a mix of these 3 forms of communication which really have changed the landscape in the past months. So what does it mean? Well, it means experience are still very, very important. So don't think about just throughput, how many people you get through the store as fast as possible. People still expect, besides value and promotion, the main reason people go shopping, they expect to get a good deal. 58% still expect experience in store. So don't forget that. Don't only look at efficiency. Experience are still very, very important and will be in the future. Stefan.
Yes, and all these changing customer behaviors also trigger demands and technology consequences for the digital signage industry. For example, consumer restraint means companies will have limited budgets. So what you offer to companies needs to be catering to these limited budgets, using existing technologies, but also drive innovation with limited budgets. Contactless. Many of you use touch. You might think about complementing that with voice, gaze, and gesture control, and we're going to talk about that. Sustainability. Most of the government money will be linked to some form of sustainability. So think about green signage. Think about what you can do in terms of sustainabilities. Video communication. I know many of you are providing communication platforms and communication solutions in the corporate world. The interesting question will, how do you compete with IT and AV and also the big display manufacturers? And finally, we see more and more people trusting their mobiles to do commerce. But it's not only about shopping on their mobile phone, it's really about engaging customers in mobile phones. So for the industry, many of these topics are new, but they also give new opportunities for you. And in terms of technology, I talked about complementing touch with different technologies, and they are out there. They are ready to use. You just have to think also about processes, how to apply them. Other topics, data and analytics, really COVID-19 has been a game changer in that respect, because companies, especially retailers, start looking into how many people enter their stores. So that's kind of the entry point for digital signage companies to get that topic onto the agenda. Talking about connected customer journeys, using mobiles, but also on the operational side. Think about how you can help businesses enable their frontline employees with information on their devices so they can better serve their customers. And last but not least, think about what kind of sustainable technology solutions you can offer. Because as I said, many governments are linking their money to green signage solutions. So, Florian, what have we learned during COVID? I think we've only seen the beginning. We are at the very beginning of this crisis, even though it feels really tough and hard. It will be a long crisis. We will have to live with it probably for the next 12, 18 months at least, and we will see many, many challenges coming from that. But also, we see behavioral changes as they require agility. So you have to be quick on really discovering what's needed and then reacting to it. And therefore, we see new opportunities. We see more opportunities than threats for the industry. As you said in your opening remarks, digital signage is more valuable than ever.
Yeah, and maybe to end this, digital signage is part of the solution, not the problem. I think this is really, really interesting. There's so much opportunities, even when we will have local lockdowns and stuff like it, digital signage can really give you the platform, the tool to inform your customers and get more of it on. Good. That was our COVID-19 impact presentation. We will have more keynotes coming up. Stay tuned.